each and every one of us, that we are mandated to buy health care.
And to that point, Mr. Stenberg, if the Affordable Health Care Act is ruled unconstitutional, what pieces in there need to be kept in there? Which would you keep in there and maybe expand upon?
Well, I think we really need to get rid of Obamacare entirely and start over. And I agree with Senator Fischer on many of the things that she said. I think that if we can eliminate Obamacare either through a vote in the United States Senate and the Congress or through the United States Supreme Court, that there are several things that we can do looking into the future involving health care. One is to allow insurance companies to sell across state lines so that there's more competition that will bring down the cost of health insurance. Another is tort reform so that we don't have money going to pay lawyer fees. We don't have doctors who have to practice defensive medicine by doing a lot of tests that aren't necessary that dramatically increase the cost of health care. And then I think we need to reform things such as Medicaid, which is medical care for the economically disadvantaged. And that's, we need to return control of that to the states, and I see my time's up, so hopefully we'll get to address that more later.
And Mr. Flynn, if the Affordable Health Care Act is ruled unconstitutional, what pieces of it would you like to see kept and maybe expanded upon?
I don't see a piece that I like of it, actually. It's 2,700 pages long. And I like what Justice Scalia said, you know, it's cruel and unusual punishment. And I think when you get around to solutions, we have to start looking at preventive care and the scopes of practice, what doctors can and can't do. The doctors are really limited very much what they can do, and that's coming from the pharmaceutical companies. So the pharmaceutical companies and their lobbyists are really running healthcare, and it's all bent to their angle. And so I'm for more alternative measures, and I think the majority of Americans are for that. And so we really have to go after that, and then we have to get rid of the mandates. And the mandates are a state issue. They've been a state issue, and there's an average of 52 mandates per state for health care. I've been in health care since 1982. I was a health insurance agent, and I've seen this coming forever. And so that's what I don't believe in any part of Obamacare one bit.
Senator Fischer, looking now at the budget and the spending issues this country has, do you believe there's ever a time we need to raise the debt ceiling, and what should those times be? Or how would you go about keeping us from raising the debt ceiling as a U.S. Senator?
To keep us from raising the debt ceiling, we need to get our spending under control. That's what I hear, and that's what I know. I've been in the legislature 8 years. We've balanced our budget 8 years. We did again this year. We are required to do so here in Nebraska. I support a balanced budget amendment at the federal level as well. We have to at least start heading in that direction, but it's not going to happen overnight. You have to cut spending, but you have to address the debt. In order to do that, I believe we need to encourage small business growth. We need to look at those small businesses that are the economic engines of this economy and let them create jobs by getting government out of the way. You can reduce regulations, you can reform a tax code, you can reduce energy costs, and yes, you have to repeal Obamacare. But if we're going to move forward in this country, it won't happen overnight. And don't listen to any politician that says, send me to Washington because I'm going to change it right now. We all know that these are serious times, and it takes serious and thoughtful discussion and action. Thank you.
Mr. Stenberg, do you believe we would need to stop raising the debt ceiling? Is there ever a time we would need to raise the debt ceiling? And what actions would you take to stop spending so much in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I do support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States that would require Congress to pass a balanced budget each year, just as we do here in Nebraska. As part of that amendment, it would also require that in order to raise taxes, it would require a supermajority vote of the Congress, so that instead of balancing our budget by raising our taxes, the Congress would be more or less forced to balance the budget by cutting federal spending. There's a number of things we can do to rein in federal spending. One is we need to permanently ban earmarks. Earmarks are used to buy votes in the Congress for more spending and to vote for bad legislation. Just recently, Mr. Boehner, the majority leader of the House, is talking about bringing back earmarks in order to get a highway bill passed. In other words, he needs earmarks to buy votes to pass legislation. That's exactly the wrong thing. We have too much spending because there's too many people who are being bought off by earmarks. And our time is up, so I'd like to continue later on this.
Well, I meant to say earlier that if you want an extra minute, you can ask for it judiciously. I'm not going to give it to you every time, but on this example, Mr. Stenberg, because this is the first time asking, would you like an extra minute to expand upon that answer? Okay, and everyone gets the same opportunity, but not every single time. All right.
Okay. Well, and then we need to look at failed federal programs and failed federal agencies. One of those is the Department of Education, which has failed in its mission to improve K-12 education. I would eliminate the Department of Education, get rid of all of the rules and regulations on our local schools that are imposed by the federal government, and simply block grant whatever education funding is advisable from the federal government without strings attached. I'd also eliminate the Federal Department of Energy, except for the nuclear regulatory functions, for the same reasons. It has failed in its mission to develop our domestic energy resources and make us energy independent. What we need to do is get the federal government out of the way, open federal lands to oil and gas leasing, and let the private sector develop our domestic energy resources. We can do that. If we do that, we can become energy self-sufficient in this country within a decade. There's a lot of other things we can do to cut spending. We can reduce the size of the vehicle fleet in the federal government, as I did when I was director of the Department of Administrative Services here in Nebraska. And we can revise the federal pension system so that it's a 401k for all new federal hires, including members of the House and Senate, just as the private sector is doing.
Mr. Flynn, do you believe we need a constitutional balanced budget amendment, and if so, why? I actually have plans for you in just a moment on those same lines, Senator. I'm going to take care of you. Hold on a second. But to Mr. Flynn, do you believe we need a constitutional balanced budget amendment, and if so, why?
No, I have never said I believed in that, and I hear it a lot. Actually, I believe we ought to go after the central bank. That's the problem. Every time you hear that we need a balanced budget amendment, it's just bloviating as far as I'm concerned. And what really needs to be done is we need to go after the printing of money. Benjamin Franklin claimed that the real cause of the American Revolution was that the Bank of England was getting us in so far into debt that's what happened. And we just get printing money and printing money and printing money. And so this is what Thomas Jefferson said about central banks. He said, "I sincerely believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than the standing armies. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs." And so there is no balancing of the budget for real until we go after the central banks and get our monetary system working right.
Senator, because you addressed the balanced budget issue in your answer to your last question, I'm going to kind of give you the same answer that Mr. Stenberg went out on, and that was, so how do we control spending then?
Here in Nebraska, we have to have a balanced budget. And I don't believe I'm bloviating when I say that we should do that also at the federal level, with all due respect. It's okay. We control spending and we balance the budget. We do it here in Nebraska. In fact, just this last week, here at the state level, we had to cut another $10 million from A-bills in order to balance our budget. I know how to cut spending. We do it. We had a $1 billion shortfall last year here in the state. And as a committee chair, I was one charged with looking for 10% cuts of those agencies under my committee's jurisdiction. We went through a process where you look at downsizing government, you look at finding those efficiencies. You do it in a rational way. You eliminate programs that don't work. takes time. But you go through and you look at programs, you meet with those agencies, and you discuss those programs that don't work. And that's how you eliminate them. That's how you control spending.
Mr. Flynn has asked for a 30-second rebuttal. I will provide that for you right now.
Well, I disagree with the way Nebraska balanced their budget in the last 4 years. Actually, they took $2 billion worth of stimulus money over the 2 sessions, and that has all kinds of strings attached, and that's not the way you balance budget. As an investment advisor, I know how to balance budgets, I know how to work with money, and you cut programs for real, and you don't take federal monies, which really starts to take away our power as a state.
Senator, your response?
With regards to the stimulus money that came to Nebraska, our Governor Heineman in this state accepted that money, as did all the other 49 governors across this country. It's the job of the legislature then to appropriate that money. I believe that we made responsible decisions in how to spend that money. We did not create any new programs that have ongoing costs. We spent $160 million with regards to roads, and it was not new construction, it was maintenance, it was resurfacing. Other areas that we put money in were child welfare and corrections. And as I said, no new programs were created, so we saw no ongoing costs.
Thank you. Mr. Stenberg, on the issue of jobs, what policies would you pursue to restore jobs in America?
Well, I think we need to understand that it's the private sector that creates jobs. And the reason we've had one of the slowest economic recoveries in the history of our country has been poor federal policy. I think there are several things we need to do to create the climate so that the private sector can create jobs. One of those is to repeal Obamacare. The second is to roll back the heavy federal regulatory burden that makes it so hard to do business and increases the cost of doing business. And I have 2 proposals to do that. One, legislation that would repeal each and every major federal regulation adopted by the Obama administration and make bureaucrats go back and start over. Number 2, require that before any new major federal rule or regulation went into effect, that it be submitted to and voted on by the Congress of the United States before it can take effect. It's time we took the power out of the hands of the unelected bureaucrats and put it back in the hands of our elected officials, which is where the Constitution of the United States places it. My time is up, but I have some more to talk about.
I'm sure.
I won't ask for another minute right now, Scott.
Okay, I'm sure we'll get back on the subject, or I'm sure you can move back in that direction later, Mr. Stenberg.